Hello and welcome to Nexus Extra. Today we're looking at the Brereton Report, a landmark inquiry into how some of Australia's special forces operated in Afghanistan. The inquiry was published last week and alleges that Australian troops were responsible for 39 unlawful killings of Afghan prisoners and civilians. Now, to discuss the findings and to find out more about what it's like to operate in Afghanistan, we're joined by Sergeant Rudy Reyes, a former Recon Marine who served 3 tours, first in Afghanistan immediately after 9/11, and then his team ran operations that located and destroyed Al-Qaeda in the Kandahar Valley, and then in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and finally in Fallujah in 2004-5. Rudy Reyes, thank you so much for joining us here on Nexus Extra. Really appreciate it. Before we get into what happened in Australia, please tell us what it was like for you when you went to Afghanistan.
What it was like for me when I went to Afghanistan, well, the towers were just hit and my team and my platoon had just left Australia. We had been training with the Australian commandos and their border guard and border patrol. As most of us adults, it has been a defining moment in our world culture. So you can imagine now living in this defining moment that has changed the world as we know it, and receiving orders, top secret orders, ammunition, explosives, crypto, which is the fills that we use for our radio to have covered communication, and then top secret maps and imagery from satellites to prepare us to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. I was a young man and a junior man on my team, although a scout sniper and heavily trained. This was my first time being deployed, and on this deployment as a force in readiness, we were mobilized immediately when our country was attacked. It was a blur of responsibilities. I did not have any time to be afraid. I had no time to care about my personal welfare. All of my energy was poured into preparing for this, the longest insertion in history, from the Persian Gulf all the way to Pakistan, then Afghanistan. I had a job to do. I had my teammates to look out for. I was in charge of the routes. I was in charge of the insert and extract points and making the overlays and maps for higher command. And my job was to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire maneuver.
And you were
so
working...
there was no time for anything else. And that's how it felt on my very first war.
And you were working with Australian Special Forces. Tell us about that.
I had the most incredible relationship and incredible admiration for the Australian SAS. So the SAS in particular from Perth. And these men, they also had similar weapon systems as ourselves. Many of the other Australian Army were using Steyr AUGs, and these professional gunfighters and professional operators who had a great attitude. They had M4s and machine gun systems similar to our own, and we all shared our air assets, our intelligence assets, our imagery, because there was such a massive pieces of terrain to cover with only about 100 of us fighters. We took Rhino, we were in Camp Rhino, and then steamed to go take Kandahar with hundreds of kilometers of terrain and mesas and quite treacherous terrain to cover with only a few men, and we used every bit of our ability and training and skills. And the SAS used a lot of their experience because they were older. Some of them were as old as I am now, and they were just really excellent. They worked with us very well.
And how did they conduct themselves? As you know, there are allegations that some special forces, Australian special forces, have unlawfully killed 39 Afghan civilians. Afghan human rights groups would say probably that is just the tip of the iceberg. Can you just tell us, how did they conduct themselves? And did you ever see any examples of unlawful killings or of behaving in an unnecessarily brutal way towards unarmed civilians or prisoners?
I observed that these men conducted themselves very professionally, and I would trust my team's life in their hands too, because we would also work jointly, and we trust and respect each other to cover the sectors. So not only do we kill the enemy, that we might even have a chance to come home alive. I never witnessed anything but extreme professionalism, and they had a very happy and relaxed attitude when we be back into the hard base to share our information and such, to better prepare all of us to fight well. And it's interesting to say the word, were they extraordinarily brutal? Well, the nature of war is to kill. And I think, as we talked earlier before, when we have armchair quarterbacks in politics, and let us be honest too, when's the last time any of these generals have been a foot soldier in the dirt, in the mud, in the snow, in the mountains hunting Taliban and Al-Qaeda? I bet they haven't. So let us remember the man on the ground, the man in the arena. We should definitely err upon his judgment over anybody else's.
Now, I wanted to bring to your attention some video, which I'll have to describe to you because I haven't played it to you, but perhaps you've seen it. It was some video that was leaked to Australia's national broadcaster, and it shows the Special Forces landing in a field. Very quickly, there is a Special Forces soldier standing over a man in the field who appears unarmed. He appears to be no threat whatsoever, and very quickly, the soldier shoots him dead. I don't know if you've seen the video, but
I've seen it.
Right.
What
can you now automatically that appears, without context wrapped around it, to be an unlawful killing. It was done at will, and there was no reason for it. Certainly a soldier has been suspended over that. But is there another side to what you see in front of you that maybe we as civilians cannot see?
Absolutely. We are fighting an enemy that uses jihadi techniques. We are fighting an enemy that hides behind civilians. We are fighting an enemy that utilizes women and children with suicide vests. And these are the enemies that I fought. And let's look at it this way. My job as a scout sniper, some of my missions at night, if I saw and observed anyone digging a hole in the side of the road, this is even before another person can put in an explosive, I killed them. And I did not care their age. I didn't care their sex. I've got to drop them, because when the operators and insurgents and terrorists are afraid now to move and dig holes at night to put in bombs that will later destroy our coalition forces. Now they are in a reactive state, not in a proactive state, and we can maybe win this thing. We have no idea in that footage who that man was and what he had done before. Was he part of a network moving explosives? Was he running intel and giving information on coalition forces, on these Australians, back to his commander and his network? I also killed men that had cell phones. Their weapon to me was a cell phone. We were taking indirect fire, and a man's in his vehicle on his cell phone, and my sniper brother and I, we killed him. And that absolutely is an enemy. So please don't, I would advise any civilian not to take a very manicured small piece of footage and make judgments upon it until they've done a very deep dive. And first of all, they can't do a deep dive. This is the military, and this is the SAS. They are the most premier unit. Do you think they're just going to give their information out? That's not the way the military, and especially the special operations community, it is not the way we operate.
Why is it important to guard that information?
We guard that information to save our lives. If the enemy knows how we think and how we operate, our TTPs, our tactical training procedures, then they can adjust, and they can be ahead of us. It's called the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. Observe, orient, decide, act. And you go back. Well, when the enemy's OODA loop is faster than ours, because they know our game plan, then more of us die. And it's sobering. And I think our citizen population needs to understand that if they truly want to be about our veterans and our warfighting community. Because after it's all said and done, without our military to enforce trade and to be the big brother of strength, to keep our brother nations and sister nations safe, so that they can have a stable commerce and therefore a stable community, it all goes away. So without our military, the US, the UK, Australia, Germany, we really have nothing.
Rudy,
do we want to just give it over to the very rich oil producing nations who still don't let women drive, have a driver's license, and cut off hands for theft and behead people for for being against Islam? No, we do not. We stay with our rule of law, and we stay with nations that bring in all cultures.
Rudy, I understand. Yeah, I mean, you're alluding to Saudi Arabia, and the weird thing is that the United States is happy to sell billions and billions of dollars worth of weapons to them. I imagine you would question that. Either you can question that now, or I can get on to the next question. It's up to you.
Well, how about this? My best young recon brother, gunnery sergeant, my gunnery sergeant brother that I raised up as a young man who fought with me in Iraq twice. He was murdered inside the command post in Afghanistan by Afghan army, who were really traitors and were all working for Al-Qaeda. So how do we even know who this casualty or KIA, who he is, and what he's done? We don't know.
Right. Let me ask you about what war does to a man psychologically, because although you've given an extensive description of men behaving honorably, it would be surely impossible to say that there are no men fighting out there who have perhaps changed in character over the years, and who have become perhaps intoxicated with the power that resides within their rifle in an environment where there are no laws. It's a wild place. So I'm going to assume that there are some men out there who have become merciless killers, who do so in a rogue way, outside of the rules of combat, the laws of war. And I'd like to ask you, what is it about being deployed over and over again, as the Special Forces in Australia were, that degrades a man's humanity?
Mark, what degrades your humanity, or let us say calluses it, is the constant friction, impossible timelines, bloody violence everywhere. And believe it or not, violence and aggression become the most stable tools you have to survive in a new environment and worldview in which death is around every corner, on every street, and any person can have a suicide vest on them and kill you when you have compassion. When you go out to give MREs or medical aid to the local populace, and you can be killed then. You have to become callous, or else the mission is not complete. And it's very difficult to deal with mental health issues if you die over there. If you complete the mission, no matter how bloody and how deadly it is, and you come home and we have our struggles and we have our things to unpack from the things that we've carried, well, at least we have an opportunity to work on them here. I was just listening to accounts of Tarawa in the Pacific, the Marines on Tarawa. And after fighting the Japanese, who never gave up, these men fighting for 20 days. In 20 days, these men became husks of their former selves. And this is the real cost of war, and this is the real cost of campaign. And we've just forgotten all of this. I mean, if 40 years ago, and all of our grandfathers and great grandfathers still alive from World War II, and then all of our dads in Vietnam, we would still know these lessons. But nowadays, we've forgotten these lessons.
Well, that's a really interesting point.
We've become very weak.
It's an interesting point because in Australia, the senior commanders are trying to distance themselves from the people who are implicated in this inquiry, as if to say, we had no idea what was going on at this level, even though the head of the army and the head of the military, the entire military in Australia, were both SAS men and were both responsible for, back in 2008, 11, they were responsible for those men. I wanted to ask you about what you make of the senior people in the military, either in America or in Australia, trying to distance themselves from the men on the ground.
Matt, the same thing has happened in our military culture here too. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper community, the Navy SEAL community has come under the same scrutiny. And I believe from my experiences, and I worked later as a counterterror and counterpoaching specialist as well for the State Department, so I continue to work in the military field. Our militaries are designed as corporate entities. And our officers that run these corporate entities, it's very difficult as they progress their career up to still keep those core values of taking care of their men, because they become distanced from the front lines. They have the hot coffee, they've got a warm rack. And let me tell you what, if you are not immersed in combat all the time, and therefore your nervous system, your soul, everything about you is connected to the land and the people, then you're not a frontline man. And if you're not a frontline man, and let's say you've done some heavy stuff, and now now you're trying to distance yourself even from maybe even some of the hard things you've done. You've got a nice job and you wear a nice uniform now. You're not always dirty and sweaty. I think the corporate nature of our military, anytime there is a struggle, remember, we are fire and forget weapons. Really, if they really cared about us, they would treat us a lot differently. We are very effective tools, but let us never be confused that the corporate entity of the military is the honor and the passion and the love we have for our brothers. It's different. And that's why you're seeing these men, even SAS former platoon commanders who are now very high in the ranks, why they're distancing themselves, because they've lost.
And the politicians?
They've lost that.
You were saying that, in the old days, the older generation had fought in Vietnam or fought in the Second World War. They were politicians. They had some awareness of the demands of war. And the politicians these days do not. You feel that's a problem, that they don't understand what it's like?
That is a problem, Matt. I mean, we, throughout our history, throughout human history, our politicians were also warriors. And normally you had to be a warrior first because you couldn't make it to the top any other way, because the world was a very, very, very combative place. And it still is. It's only us here in the first world, disconnected from Africa and the Middle East and what's even happening, of course, in the Far East, in the Philippines. We're disconnected. But it's happening. We're having genocides and warfare as we speak right now, and we've become so successful that now we have politicians, which is mostly an economic thing, and it costs so much money to even run for office. Where do you think you're going to get a military man that has the money to run for office these days? I mean, it's a dang scam.
And what about the current generation? I understand you're pretty worried that they've had it so comfortable, that they're so distracted with things like social media, that they're no longer capable or even interested in defending their country in the same way as previous generations.
Matt, I cannot agree with you more on that as well. This has become like the me and the not Semper Fi, Semper Fidelis on that flag on the United States Marine Corps. It means always faithful. Semper Fi is what we say. Nowadays it's Semper I. It seems that people do not even take advantage of the supercomputers they have in their hands now. You know, our supercomputers, you can read history and learn languages from these things. And instead they're just looking at pictures of butts and freaking butts and weight loss tea and shopping. I mean, we have to get back to what made our countries great in the first place: bravery, expeditionary mindset, also a compassion that no other nations before ours had, to bring people in and to love them and give them an opportunity to citizenship and to bring their family up with
Rudy,
education and with a future.
I want to ask you
right now we need to really get back to those roots and I mean, look at Rome. Look what happened to Rome. If we're not careful, we will be on the same path.
Tolerance and apathy are the final virtues of a dying society or a dying civilization. Rudy, I want to ask you one last question. I want to try to end on something hopeful. We were talking with a Special Forces Australian in the main program, and he was saying that 10 times the number of soldiers die after the war because of suicide than on the battlefield. And I imagine you have an awful problem like that in the United States as well. You have managed, despite the tremendous amount of battles you've been in, you have managed to pull your life together and create something positive. Can you tell us what you do? And I understand you're doing something for the environment as well, but what do you do, and how do you hope that your example will inspire people like yourself in the United States?
And well, what I'm doing is, it's called Force Blue, and we're a nonprofit of all veteran commando combat divers who now use our skills that we learned from war to rebuild coral reefs and to fight the ultimate war, which is to save the planet. I wanted to harness the energy, the passion, and the high-end skills that we have great pride for, and now shift it into a direction where it's purely positive. And the enemy is massive. The enemy is apathy and waste and the human abuse of the environment. We can do something about that. So we rebuild coral reefs, and it's painstaking and very difficult work. When we also tag and save green sea turtles, we do work in all kinds of marine conservation, and it brings the lights back on for the men. And it's Recon Marines, it's SEALs, Pararescue, Green Berets, Delta Force, British Royal Marine Commandos, SBS. We have Australian SAS that are waiting to come over to the program. It's just magnificent. That's what we need to do, is adapt. We're the best at adapting to the battlefields when we're under immense stress with violence. Let's use that same adaptation. Let's use the same creativity to now do something positive for our whole community.
Rudy Reyes, thank you so much for your time today on Nexus Extra. It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I hope to see you all again very soon.
Thank you very much. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, you can see the full episode of this week's show on the link somewhere below. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.